Hello and welcome to Newman University's Universe We Live In Science and Society class. It's summer 2016. I'm sitting on the front porch recording some of these videos for your class and hoping that you're having a great summer. This course is a History of Science and Technology class. It meets the Newman Studies program Universe We Live In core component. In this class we will examine the history of science in the Western tradition. This is to say that we're going to take a look at the ancient world, ancient Middle East, ancient Near East, Greece and Rome. We're going to take a look at Europe in the Middle Ages, that'll include Islam. And we will have some limited opportunity to get to India and China. You have a textbook that'll take you all over the world, but for the purposes of our class we're going to primarily focus on the West. The West means, again, the region of the Middle East, of Europe, North Africa, the Mediterranean, yeah, pretty much that. So, off we go. We'll examine the role of technology in human history in addition to science, and we'll ask the question, as your textbook does, which came first, science or technology? It's something to think about. We begin in the ancient civilizations of the river valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates and the Nile. So we begin at the beginning. We then head into the Mediterranean for the Greek contribution. Many people say that science and scientific thinking begins with the Greeks. Again, your textbook will argue that there's some development going on in ancient society prior to the Greeks that is worth looking at as well. We get to the Middle Ages, we will be looking at the rise of Islam, and we'll also look at the triumph of Christianity in Europe. Both religions had extraordinary influence on the development of scientific thinking. So we'll be doing a little bit of the connection between philosophy, religion, and science. We'll stay in Europe as we trace the scientific revolution. Scientific revolution, perhaps one of the greatest triumphs of Western culture. Some would argue differently, I'm sure, but one of the great impacts, if you will, of the scientific revolution was that it not only led to a new understanding of man's relationship to the stars, to the world around him, but also perhaps a new understanding of humanity's relationship to the nature of God, to the nature of God's creation. This leads to an era known as the Enlightenment, where we do a total re-examination of the human character in light of the scientific method. Scientific revolution, this age of enlightenment, also led to the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, many of you may be aware, a period in the 18th and 19th centuries in Europe that led to mass production. Mass production, where we emphasized quantity, perhaps, over quality. But the Industrial Revolution is going to lead us into a whole different worldview, a whole different place, where we have cities of millions of people living and working together. We're truly learning to come into the modern era with the industrial age. We'll examine in this course the connections between science and religion, as I've already indicated. We'll examine in this course the connections between science and literature. This is a class on science and society. I'm an historian, and I am interested in this particular element in world history that connects society so interestingly. So science and society, science and technology, how it impacts the way we organize ourselves in communities, in cities, how it impacts our connection to religion, to literature, to life. We'll wrap up the class with a look at the 20th and 21st centuries. Some extraordinary achievements made in theoretical science in the 20th century, as you well know. But also we start to identify more and more possibilities associated with the scientific method and the world in which we live, whether it's warfare or pollution or education or curing amazingly devastating diseases so that we can extend our lives, extend the quality of our lives. A lot of these new questions that science attempts to answer also lead to a lot of controversies, as you well know. So whether it's vaccinations, whether it's genetically modified organisms or GMO crops, there are all kinds of issues that science attempts to tackle, that we, as a human culture, attempt to tackle, right? But oftentimes these lead to extraordinary controversies. So we will wrap up our discussion of science and society as we move into the 20th century with some of these controversies. As I said before, I'm an historian, and so I am fascinated by the history of the human experience. And when one takes a look at history and some of the events that have had a terrific impact on history, science is right up there.